Hey, I'm Dr. Lausell Bryant. I work as a clinical associate professor here at NYU Silver and also direct our doctorate in social work program. So we are so excited to have you join us today for this really important and timely conversation, accountability to Afro-Latinx communities. But first, before we embark on the program, we'd like to ask you to do a brief poll. So if we could, our tech support could help us get the poll in the chat, and we'd love to have you take that. Thank you. Okay. So it looks like we have most of the respondents saying that accountability to Afro-Latinx communities is really about all of the above: increasing visibility, reducing stigma, confronting internalized racism, and embracing our African roots and all of our markers. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. All right. So I want to begin by first offering you some definitions on what do we mean by accountability and what do we mean by Afro-Latinx. So looking at the definition of accountability, it refers to responsibility. So in this context, responsibility to Afro-Latinx communities. And in addition to responsibility, it means answerability. We answer to, we give an account to Afro-Latinx communities of what we've done, what we're doing, what we plan to do. And in terms of the definition of Afro-Latinx, I would define that as Latinos who identify with their Black or African ancestry, in addition to their Latinx roots. So why is this topic so important? I just want to share with you that on a personal level, this topic is very, very close to my heart and very emotional. And I expect that it might be emotional for many of you as well. And in 1 hour, we'll just be able to touch the depths of this topic, but we're going to do our best to do it justice and give it the attention, the respect that it deserves. And hopefully there'll be more that we can do on this topic. So in addition to being an emotional topic, it is a topic we don't discuss nearly enough. You know, as Latinx people, we can join with other Latinx people all over the world. Spain, we can go to Spain and connect with people, Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, Puerto Rico, and we can belong by the shared heritage as Latino people. But when we add in the dimension of race, when we talk about having African roots, that could mean that even within our own families or amongst our closest friends, we may have had a sense of being a little bit different. We belong, but we were a little bit different. We may have had some trouble feeling a sense of full belonging or feeling fully equal if we have characteristics or markers that lean toward the African side. Our families surely love us, but it may feel like love in spite of those markers. We may be called names, sometimes in teasing and sometimes with deep affection. And as you listen to some of the ones I'm going to share right now, I'd love you to put in the chat any others that come to your mind. So we may hear things like this: "Ven acá, negrita." Ay, mi chulita prietita. Is this ringing a bell? Chatita linda. Cabecita de algodón, cottonhead. Este es el trigueñito de la familia. This is our little dark one in the family. Okay, so think about others you may have hurt. Was this an intention on the part of our families to hurt us? Absolutely not, right? All of this is often expressed with affection, but we're still maybe getting the message that there's something about us that's a little bit different. And it's important enough to point out or to give us a little different affectionate name. Okay, I want to share a very brief story of being, I think I was 3, 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And my mother used to tell people who met me that when I was born without any lips. My lips were so thin that people used to ask, didn't you give her lips? Like, what happened to her lips? And as I grew up, my lips became fuller. And she used to tell people that the reason why that happened is that I made my own lips big by pouting. So that there was an explanation as to why my lips were like that when neither she nor my father had larger lips. Okay, so if I required that explanation, that sent a message to me that there was something a little bit different about me. And it needed to be explained because I was different from my parents. Okay, again, it's just like a story in the family, but I got the message like something about me isn't like the others, and maybe it's not as good. So I just want to see what people have put in the chat around some of the other, yes, mi San Martin. San Martin, Saint Martin, is one of the Catholic saints who is a dark-skinned person. That's really interesting. Mi negra, mi negrito, yes, okay, my little black person, right? This is fascinating stuff. Okay, so one of the things that's important about this is before we experience any sense of being different in school, we may have already experienced that at home. And these larger attitudes about white being right and black being less are so pervasive that they become internalized, right? Even in our families, and they become perpetuated, even by those who love us deeply. And that's why this is so hard to talk about, because it's painful. And many of us may have even repressed it. The identity as someone Latinx is really complex and layered. Some view being Latinx as a racial category, as we see in the boxes we have to check. Are you Black, white, or Hispanic, right? So some of us look at it as a racial category. Others see it as an ethnicity, a heritage, but we declare race differently. We'll say, yes, I'm Hispanic, Latino, but I am racially white or racially Black. And you know what? Skin tone is not the only marker. There are other markers, such as hair texture, curl patterns, the width of the nose, the thickness of the lips, and in my case, the extent of my assets, the one I'm sitting on. So just on Tuesday night, we celebrated the launch of the Spanish translation of the book, Latinx and Social Work. And in that process, we are reclaiming our narratives, our linguistic heritage. And now in this discussion, we are reclaiming and owning and celebrating the beauty and power of our African ancestry and our African heritage. We're refusing to be Black or Latino and choosing our own Blackness and our own Latinidad. Not an either or, but a both and. And Afro-Latinx as a concept pays tribute to the mezcla, the mix that we all are. Now I'd like to turn it over to Erica Sandoval, our visionary for this work. Licensed social worker, entrepreneur, convener, visionary, who saw the need to amplify our voices and created and continues to create the mechanisms to advance that. So, Erica.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you. So powerful. I'm just so honored to share space with you and all of you here today. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. A special thank you to NYU and Rishaline Dashield, who has been an incredible partner to us, and Liz Gallimore for all your incredible support. We all see you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. And to you, Linda, Dr. Linda Lausell, you're a madrina, you're a godmother of social work, and all your love and mentorship made this all possible. Many of you may know me. I'm Erica Sandoval, the founder of Latinx and Social Work Inc. And if you read my chapter, you know that I'm Ecuadorian immigrant, a single mom to a beautiful Afro-Latina, Isabella, a social worker, an entrepreneur, and an advocate for the Latinx community. I've been a social worker for 12 years, and I've seen how social workers perform miracles daily, how we help clients achieve the impossible, how we can heal the deepest wounds in individuals, families, and communities. But I've also seen how the majority of social work executives are white, and how Latinx are the largest ethnic minority in the US, yet only 40% are social workers are Latinx, only 14%. And Latinx are particularly subject to hiring bias. They're underpaid, we're underpaid, and face disproportionate job losses at times. So I was inspired to create Latinx and social work as a way to call attention to the racism, the bias, and discrimination experienced by social workers. But I didn't want to do it alone. I wanted to highlight the diversity of Latinx social workers in all areas, in all professions. And I knew the world needed to hear more stories of the institutional barriers we face and the ways we heal ourselves through our community and through our work. So my network of amazing friends and colleagues and mentors all contributed to sharing their moving stories, their narratives, and we became a best-selling book. So we knew this was needed. And now we've launched the Latinx and Social Work discussion series with NYU. And here today, we're talking about some really deep discussions, accountability to our Black and Afro-Latinx community members. Next month, we're going to have a day-long Latinx and Social Work Summit for all social work students. So please make sure to save that and share that and mark your calendars to join us on March 1st. And I'm so thrilled that our stories of challenges and triumphs can reach a wider audience and change more lives. And our work goes much deeper than individual cases and clients. We're changing the world. And by having these discussions, we're healing and transforming. So without further ado, I am honored to introduce you to our amazing panel for today's discussions. Bios will be in the chat, and we encourage you to use the chat to share your comments, affirmations, and whatever is coming up for you. We will have question and answers at the end of the talk. And please feel free to add your questions to the chat so we can address them at the end. And without further ado, I'm so honored to share in this space with all of you here today. And I'd love for you to just introduce yourselves, my contributing authors and fellows and leaders in social work. Share your name, pronouns, and current role. Thank you. We'll start with Ingrid.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ingrid McFarlane. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am currently an oncology social worker at Cohen Children's Medical Center, but I also have a private practice in Huntington, New York, where I work with children, adults, and couples. And I'm so excited to be here today. And I pass it on to Karen.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I had to look down to figure out all of the titles that I've blessed myself with. My name is Karen Ciego. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am currently founding director of an amazing organization called Clinicians of the Diaspora, which is a collection of clinicians of color who provides healing spaces to people of color in their workplaces of work. We do healing circles. We provide private individual therapy, group therapy, and such. We also do conferences and the like, and I can go on forever. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to pass it along to my wonderful next colleague.
Thank you, Karen. So hi, everyone. Good morning. Linda, I just want to thank you for opening up the space in the way that you did. That was just really beautiful and moving. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, for sharing space with us today. My name is Laura Quiros. My pronouns are she, her. I'm calling in from Montclair, New Jersey, on the land of the Lenape. And I am Associate Professor of Social Work at Adelphi University. And I also have a consulting practice with a few other people where I really look at diversity, equity, inclusion from a trauma-informed lens, and so really highlighting socio-political trauma and how that impacts how systems of oppression impact individuals on a micro level. And so thank you again, Linda and Erica and all my colleagues and authors for sharing space today. And with that, Paula, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paula McMillan Perez. I am also a social worker, full-time with the New York City Department of Education, and I also am the founder of Personalize Your Coaching, which is basically a community-based organization that works with not just individuals, but the community, whether it's an organization or an agency, to create opportunities for coaching for individuals who may not already have access to it. And we will be expanding in Social Work Month, yay, to provide consulting services for diversity, equity, inclusion as well. And my pronouns are she and her, and I would like to send it back to our fabulous facilitators.
Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you, everyone, for the incredible introductions. I want to start with a question to all of you. Tell us how you identify and what early experiences led to this identification. And we'll start with Ingrid.
Hi, good morning again. Yes, how do I identify? I identify as an Afro-Latina with strong Caribbean roots. I was blessed with growing up multiculturally and internationally. My maternal side of the family is from Cuba, but then they moved to Jamaica, then to London, and then to New York. So I grew up in London. I grew up in New York. And basically, I say that I had the best and the worst of, racism, because when I was in London, everyone really embraced each other. People embraced different cultures, races, and things were, not to say that there isn't racism, but it's a different way that people really respected and honored you. So I just felt comfortable in my own skin. And when I moved to New York, back to New York when I was 10, and I just became very, very, it was just prominent that I was Black, but not in a good way. I always knew I was Black and I was proud of it. I felt good in my skin, but I remember just feeling, made to feel different all the time, made to feel different. I had my hair in braids and I was teased, talking about the fact that, they were like train tracks, people just really didn't embrace me in the way that I had previously been embraced. I always excelled in school, so I continued to excel, but it was almost as if my achievements didn't matter just because of the color of my skin. My family, I'm thankful for them because they sheltered me through this entire process and really let me know that I can still achieve that. I deserve to be where I am. And I think if I didn't have that and I didn't have my faith, I would not feel as good as I do about myself to this day. I think also going into my undergraduate education, I actually learned even more about my Black identity. And, I was just very, thrown into things that I didn't learn in school. We know that, in the elementary and high school, you're just learning about Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. And it was Martin Luther King is good, Malcolm X is bad, you know, and that's basically the way that it's kind of presented to you. When I went to my undergraduate institution at Sarah Lawrence College, I was just thrust into learning about my Black identity. I took sociology. I took a lot of African-American studies. My professor, they're basically writing books at that time. And so I really work with them on writing the books about, you know, the African-American identity and learning about sociology. And this just really made me feel a sense of pride again in who I am, you know, my ancestry. When I went to my graduate education at the University of Pennsylvania, my master's thesis, I basically focused that on the impact of cultural competency in a healthcare setting with patients who have chronic illnesses. So I basically looked at Terry Cross. Her book is called Toward a Culturally Competent System of Care. And I basically did ethnographic studies with the interdisciplinary team at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I was actually interning in my second year. And I brought in speakers to really let people understand about the Black identity, because as I watched things and I saw the treatment, that there was different treatment to, you know, patients and clients who were not white. And I really felt that this was not right. So I said I needed to focus on that. Because I'm able to speak Spanish and French fluently, I was really, you know, very much a person who said, you know, we need to give the healthcare system to people in Spanish, in French, you know, whatever language they spoke. And I pushed forward in my internship to really you translate a lot of their, you know, family handbooks into Spanish and into French. And this is when I realized, you know, what my worth was and what I could do. And even though, you know, people were struggling, I said, you know what, you can make a difference. And basically, this was what started me on my path to social justice.
Amazing. Amazing, Ingrid. I love working with you. We've been working together for so long and supporting a lot of our communities in healthcare. I want to pass this on to Karen.
Yes, thank you. And Ingrid, a lot of what you shared resonated very deeply with me, from how I identify and how I came to this current identity. And despite myself, I'm going to quote Freud and say, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And in this instance, sometimes Black is Black. And so that is the way that I identify myself first and foremost, phenotypically, for all of the reasons. I check all of the marks. And to liken this to a diagnosis, sometimes an accurate diagnosis is liberating, in that it helps you create interventions and treatment plans that are aligned with health and with you know, seeing yourself and you know, living at the highest level that you possibly can. And I believe that in my claiming my Blackness first, all of my other identities are bonuses. That includes being Latina. I do claim Latinidad. I do claim Garifuna, because Garifuna is actually my first and foremost cultural identifier, which is not, you can't see the Garifuna-ness in me. However, you can see the Blackness. So having come up in a household that the first language is Garifuna, which is a mix of West African languages with Dutch, with Arawak, with all of the other languages that influenced what now stands as Garifuna through colonialism and such. And that having been the first language, and then the second language being Spanish, that began to build who I believed that I was. And then the next lesson was going to school and interacting with children who were putting me in a box. So they were putting me in the, you're not like us. You're not Puerto Rican, are you? Like, you're not Dominican, are you? You're not. And so I had to figure out a way of identifying myself in a way that was not. It wasn't until grad school, and shout out to social work school for showing me who I am, that I began to fall in love with the people who looked like me. I began to fall in love with myself through the experience of seeing people doing amazing things and claiming their identities, whatever they may have been. And I found that to be kind of like a door through which I wanted to step through and step into my greatness so that I can be here and celebrate and invite people through that door to celebrate their Blackness or their identity, whatever that happens to be. No value judgment here. So I reiterate that, I am Black first. And I'll pass it along to Laura.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ingrid and Karen. And Karen, just, going off of where you left off before I talk about myself personally, is I just want to highlight the power of education. For me, I got my master's at Hunter, and it was when I fell in love with myself too. It was when I met people who looked like me, who shared multiple identities, reading, scholarship. And so, we're in an academic setting right now too. And so I just want to highlight the power of education as the sanctuary to identity, and particularly now with the work that we all are doing, you name the word liberating. And this is a space of liberation where we can speak truth to power and claim ourselves in ways that we may not have before. And so I think that's a really important point that I can absolutely relate to, because it wasn't when I was in my master's program that I was like, oh, that's who I am. Yep. And I'm going to own that and I'm going to claim that. My story is a little different. And I think all of ours are, which makes this so beautiful, is that, so I identify as a Black Latina who is also Jewish. And so my story is that I had a white mother who passed away this summer and a father who identifies as Black and Latino. And so my identity was given to me. I didn't have a choice. And so I remember very specifically being young and going to my mother's side of the family for Jewish holidays. And not only did anyone look like me, but they didn't understand how I could also be a child in this space and occupy a Jewish identity. Because when we think about Judaism, we also oftentimes associate that with whiteness, even though there are plenty of Black Jews. That's a different story. But so that I didn't fit there. And then at the same time, I would spend my summers in Puerto Rico, and I would be with my cousins and my uncles and my aunts. And I would want to claim the Blackness, but was also told, like, we are not Black, we're Latino, we're Latina, we are not Black, when it was very clear through the culture of the African ancestry. I mean, I just remember the music and the food and all of that being a testament to Blackness. And so I was very confused by that. I didn't know this at the time, but what was the intense anti-Black sentiment? I remember having a conversation with my uncle and him asking me why I would want to claim Blackness attached to my cultural identity of being Latina. And I was like, well, I'm not white, right? I can't go in that space. So as we look at the world, it's a dichotomy. You're either Black or white, right? These are the social constructions. So choose one. And I also felt a proudness in that Black identity, in who I was and in those spaces. And so it was very confusing for me for a very long time, because, my father being, a survivor of intergenerational trauma and experiencing discrimination and racism and oppression, which is why my brother and I were never taught Spanish, because we were said, why would we teach you Spanish if you were going to get discriminated against? And so for me, it was a really big journey. And I think, the other thing I just want to name is that I do have light skin privilege, right? I do have a privilege of having a white mother, and I own that, right? And so, I think it's also important for Latinas, Latinx, Latinos who do have light skin to name that privilege as well, because that's important too. And so this discussion is incredibly complex, and it runs many facets of how people sort of identify. But I think, sort of closing up before I pass it to Paula, is that if we could sit in spaces of sincerity, and the name of this panel today is called accountability. And so when I think of accountability, I call empathic accountability. So accountability that is grounded in love, that if I am holding you accountable, it's because I love you. It's because I want you to do better. And so I think if we are in those moments where we see that there is discrimination, there is racism, there is colorism that shows up, how do we name that in order to make space for other people that may have darker complexions, that may have tighter curls, that may have some sort of different kind of dialect to have a seat at the table also. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you. Paula, I'd love to hear from you and hear about you.
You all are a challenging act to follow, but I'm going to do my best. Though I can admit that I have a variety of similarities with the stories that have been shared thus far, one of the things that I can say is that I was an individual who was not accepted as a child by other individuals who identified as Black. I was spoken to as though I was the white girl. People didn't want to be my friend. I didn't even know bullying was a thing at this point in elementary school because of the way that I was being treated. And, you know, for those of you who read my chapter, you know a little bit, but, you know, the synopsis basically is that my community was the Latinx community. The individuals who identified as Puerto Rican, the individuals who identified as Dominican were the only people who accepted me for whatever I looked like, whatever I sounded like. They were the only people that would talk to me about hair, because I, similar to some of you, had those cornrows, I had those box braids, I had those beads at the end, and it was just like, oh, you're trying too hard. You're trying to be like us. Or why do you sound like them? So it's just like, where am I supposed to fit? And having a Caribbean parent, my mom's from Grenada, you know, old school mentality. Oh, you know, just work through it. You're in school, buckle down, do what you need to do. You're not there to make friends. And I'm sure there are many of you who have heard some of these things before. And as a child, we're not in a developmental space where we even know what to do with that. I knew that the people that looked most like me didn't want to interact with me. And people that looked similar to me made me feel like I was a part of the family. And I think the challenging piece for me was to identify what that looked like as a pre-adolescent. And granted, I'm dating myself a little bit, but like in the early 90s, there were so many things that we didn't have the same type of grasp on that we have on today. And I think one of the biggest challenges was because these individuals didn't accept me, there was a part of me that didn't accept myself. So similar to some of my co-authors, I didn't really tap into the fact that I could have multiple identities and I can fall in love with being Black and identifying as Black, identifying as Afro-Caribbean, identifying the fact that my community is the community that is made up of all of the individuals that put me in a space where I feel safe and comfortable and acknowledged and respected. And that doesn't necessarily mean because they're not Grenadian, because they're not Black, that they're not a part of my community. And one of the really challenging pieces was to get to the point where I could decide, you know what, if I'm modeling as a social worker and I'm giving a lens into something else, why am I also not teaching into this? And I think that one of the things that we do very well, not just because we're in this format, is speak truth into action. It can be hard, it can be difficult, but we all know there is no growth in comfort. So I'm proudly able to say that I am getting in touch with all aspects of all of the identities that I identify with. I married a Puerto Rican male. I want to be sure that when I do become a mother, there are cultural dishes and spirituality from that side that my child will be able to know. I want to make sure that they will be able to learn about Grenadian dishes, learn about Dominican dishes. I can share with them things from this book. I can share with my social work siblings, because I don't just fit into one box. And when it came time to fill out those college applications and you had to begin identifying as a kid, I didn't know what to put. So I checked off everything. I was like, it doesn't matter. But it matters to me to be able to identify with those who speak to me and even those who don't. And I would like to pass it back to our moderator.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. I'm going to pass it to Linda. You're all so remarkable, and there's so much depth and so much complexity to all of this. Linda.
Thank you. And audience, I just want to ask you to just do a quick pulse check on yourself. I am feeling a lot of feelings, and I imagine as you hear these stories, you are as well. Let me go to Ingrid. Ingrid, in your chapter in the book, you say, and I quote, "It became clear to me that my physical appearance, race, and ethnicity played a crucial role in how people responded to me." Tell us a little bit about how that impacted the way you felt about yourself.
Yes. So, initially, as you can imagine, I really had a lot of self-hate because people responded to me in such a negative way. I am a lover of people. I'm a lover of cultures because that's just the way that I was raised. So for me to get that response, it was really traumatizing. So it was really difficult for me to accept that at first and to really believe that this is the box that people wanted to put me in. I am so thankful, as I said before, to my undergraduate, education, because again, just as Laura said, we have to give, education its place. And I think that that's what helped me. I think learning, taking all the things that I was taught in school, in sociology, in school of social work, and really finding myself at the end of the journey of my master's, that's really what helped me to feel comfortable in my own skin. I remember, you talked about your lips, and when you were speaking to me about that, that really resonated with me because there was a time when I just hated my lips because I said, oh my God, they're just too full. Now I just love my lips. I embrace them. I will put on the brightest lipstick, and I am just like, this is me. This is me. The same thing with my skin tone. People, because I was in mostly historically white institutions growing up, I currently work, where I am in the very minority. And I've always worked in those kinds of settings. There was a lot of times people would make remarks about my complexion. Now I own it. I love it. I say, this is the skin that God has put me in. This is who I am. This is my nose. These are my lips. This is the way that I look. This is the way that I talk. And I have learned to embrace it just, I think, by taking back the history, looking at the things that I've learned that have been hidden from all of us. I feel like, in elementary school and high school, we really do not, we only learn one type of culture, and that's usually, European culture. And I think it really traumatizes, all of our youth because we don't see anyone that looks like us. I think one of the beauties of today is that we're all learning that we all matter. We're all important. And I think that, people need to have that self-love. And I know it's hard. It's not that every day I wake up feeling that I love everything. And when I feel certain things, when I'm at work, that I'm passed over by certain things, it's not to say that I just feel great every day. But I also know that I deserve to be where I am. And, regardless of the color of my skin, the way that my hair, the texture of my hair, my lips, my nose, I know that I deserve to be here by my very existence.
Thank you, Ingrid. Your words are giving me life. It's reclaiming, taking it back, right? This weapon that was used in one way to bring you down, you are taking it back and you are using it to love yourself. And that's so powerful. Let me go to Karen. Karen, in your chapter, you describe how you were overhearing a group of kids tell one of the girls in that group, "You're not Black, you're Spanish." And the girl just accepted it. And you identified in that moment with how the girl accepted that characterization of herself. And you were also considered Black, but not Spanish. And I'm thinking about in the book, you talk about the job fair you went to in which it was assumed that you didn't speak Spanish, that you were not a bilingual person. So could you just tell us a little bit about the messages you took away from those encounters?
I think it's an expansion of the things that I was starting to learn about myself in social work school, about this idea of creating my own identity as opposed to being told who I am. My heart sunk when I saw the young lady being told in her accepting, being told that she is Spanish, because number one, she's not Spanish, and neither were I'll assume that neither were the young people who were saying that she was Spanish, because neither of them looked to me like, like they were from Spain, but that's neither here nor there right now. I think I keep thinking about this idea of learning to float, and bear with me. So young newborns know how to float naturally, right? And over the course of time, we internalize these messages about, we learn lessons that sink us under, that take us under. And then fast forward, I'm talking about myself here. You're 41, 42, 43, and you're sinking when naturally you were supposed to have known how to float. And it's because of like the accumulation of all of the fears and the challenges that have come your way. And it's not because of the way that you were made, because you were made to float, right? And so those experiences, what they taught me were that that people and their negative or misguided or contorted perspectives of me were just a reflection of them, and that I can always float. And I, quite frankly, I actually really float in real life. Maybe as a way of the coup de grace to that feeling of not being able to. So yes, I think that those experiences were necessarily painful in order to bring me to this point of doing away with internalizing all of these messages and putting too much emphasis and too much importance on what others thought of me. And just living my life and living for these sorts of situations where we can dispel all of the things that not only that I've internalized, but that you've internalized too. So
yes.
Thank you.
Very powerful analogy about the floating and the weights that are put upon us, and being able to take back that power, because we have to define ourselves. If we don't, someone will be happy to define us for us. Okay, let me go to Laura. Laura, you said in your chapter, and I quote, "I identify as a Black cisgendered Latina who is also Jewish. I cannot separate my Blackness from my Latinness, nor do I want to." And I'm getting goosebumps as I read that. "I am complete in all of this beautiful complexity." And when I read that, Laura, to me, that sums up why we're here today. Like, to heal our whole selves and not have to compartmentalize ourselves. So Laura, what led you to this place of clarity? How did you do that work?
I mean, even when you say it, I get a little teary, because I think that, I tell Erica this all the time when we have our chats, that I believe social workers are restorers of the soul, right? I think, Karen, your analogy also reminds me of, we are born with a soul, and then all these things happen. Lots of trauma happens, pile on, and it stops our soul from being its essence of who it is. And so part of social work is being able to help people revisit that soul, that essence, where they are whole. So for me, my soul lives in that holistic identity. It lives in the complexity of being Black and Latina and Jewish and a mother and an educator and a scholar and a social worker. And so I think, I encourage all of us to make sure that we spend times and moments of healing when we can go on our soul journeys, right? Where we can revisit our soul and we can be on that journey, so we can move away from this dichotomous, sort of very myopic lens that stops us from being complete. And so I think it's just a really nice way to pause and to just remind the audience that, we are healers, and please find your soul where you are complete and revel in that.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I know we're running short on time, so very, very quickly, I want to ask all of the audience members if you would just begin to put in the chat a word, 2 words that are just describing what's coming up to you, what you're feeling right now. We really want to capture that. Okay, and as you do that, Paula, I will just ask you very quickly, you talked about really finding community within the Latinx community. Tell us about the significance of that in your journey of healing.
Ooh, I could talk for hours on that, so I'm going to try my best to condense it. For some time, I felt as though, like many of us in this space have, that there isn't a place for me. But similar to what Ingrid had stated, I was put here for a reason. I may not know what those reasons are. And there could be 20, 30 years from now, I don't know what those reasons are. But I think that having the community that I've been able to develop that has become more than family, more than friends, more than colleagues, more than, you know, my social work siblings, as I like to call many of you, it allows me to learn and develop and be able to put it forth. When I was in college, I used to say, oh, don't watch me watch TV. But now I say, watch me and watch TV, because you need to have different models. You need to have different individuals in your life. You need to have different lenses into people, into community, into culture, into spirituality, because there isn't just one way. Yes, what's on social media and what's on TV, that can be some people's community. That's how they identify. But I like to identify in this real world, because it was these individuals that brought me to a place where I can explore anything that came to me. Explore the individuals that called me white, even though I wasn't, or where that came from for them. I can speak to now when that comes up in a way that I couldn't before, similar to what Karen shared about the girl who didn't respond when I wouldn't have known how to accurately respond in that time, where I can do that now. So for the youth that I work with, for the students, for the clients, even if you don't have a point of reference, hearing someone else say it and identify as whatever and whomever and however they identify is something that I gained significantly from the Latinx community. And I'm beginning to gain in the work that I'm doing in terms of healing with my Black community, with members of the white community, and just getting it out. The verbal diarrhea, for lack of a better term. It doesn't have to be clean and neat. It needs to come out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula. Wow, this is so powerful. I told you folks, it would be hard for us to do this in 1 hour, but we are doing our best. I'd like to now introduce Jerry Connaught, who is a 4th-year PhD student here at NYU Silver, also an adjunct instructor here, and her focus is on the intersection of race and wellness. Her bio is in the chat. Jerry.
Thank you so much. First, I would love to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Ingrid, Laura, Karen, Paula. Thank you so much for this. Thank you, Erica and Dr. Lausell Bryant for moderating, and a shout out to Liz and to Richeline for helping with this event as well. I was just looking in the chat and looking at the words that people have used to describe what it is that they're feeling right now. And a few common ones that came up are connection. So everyone feels very connected, self-love, understood and seen. And so I think it really speaks to the power of us having these types of discussions and being able to have this. This is healing in practice. And it's really beautiful to be a part of, and we need more of this. So thank you guys so much for all of this. I also want to thank everyone, all the audience members who participated and showed up today, for your energy. Thank you for coming and participating in this. We ask that you please fill out a survey for us that will be dropped in the chat. It will help us kind of inform our future workshops and events. And speaking of future workshops and events, our next panel will be on March 24th at 6 p.m. So please make sure to save that in your calendars if you enjoyed today and the panel series that has been happening so far. I would love to just, with the remaining time, if we can do a little bit of a Q&A from our audience members. And I would actually like to start it off. So my research is looking at the imposter syndrome among marginalized groups, especially in social work. And particularly how social work institutions contribute to these feelings of imposterism and how it impacts BIPOC communities and their mental health and sense of self. And listening to your stories and your experiences, which I'm extremely grateful for you sharing and being so open about, it made me think of my own research and my own feelings of being an imposter that often comes up, that I think so many people also experience. And so one question that I would love to throw out is, have any of you felt a sense of imposterism in terms of your identities and being able to navigate how you identify with yourself and being in certain spaces? And how did you overcome it? Is it something that you're still dealing with and overcoming? And how do you find yourself navigating that sense of imposterism and not belonging?
Just gonna jump in real quick because it's something that I've gotten better at, but I do still struggle with. So one of the things that I do, and all my clients make fun of me for this, is I name my anxiety. So my anxiety is named Annie. So when Annie, and when I say Annie I, that's the imposter syndrome specifically, when Annie tries to creep up on me, I talk to her. I'm like, nobody wants you here. We're not friends. Like, I literally talk to her like she's another person. And it helps to kind of ground me in the fact that you got here despite all of the challenges, despite your struggles with figuring out your identity, despite you getting fired or, you know, you taking 5 years to graduate from undergrad. You got here. You have many things to bring to the table. There was a point in time when you didn't feel like you had anything brought to the table. Now I am the table, and there's room at this table for everybody. So I have to remind myself of that. So me telling Annie about herself allows me to do that.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Is there anyone else that wants? Yeah, please.
Yeah. I just, one of the interesting things about imposter syndrome, and I believe Erica and I had discussed this previously, is this idea specifically for people of color, that something to keep in mind is that some of the syndrome is really a byproduct of being told that you can't, right? Being told repeatedly that you cannot. So it's not as if it was something that you just like cooked up within yourself all of a sudden. That we are plagued with the additional weight of being told what we cannot do. So some of it is ours, and a lot of it is not. You know, so even, yes, and go on, Laura. I know.
No. I agree with you, because, you know, so I try not to use imposter syndrome and just, I think, as Paula said, name what I'm feeling, because I question, like, what am I an imposter to? Like, am I an imposter to a white world? Am I an imposter to a white, like, who am, you know, so I think sometimes it's also about like really thinking about the language that we're using and how so often unintentionally we're measuring up against whiteness and white supremacy when we could just claim what we're feeling and not be like, do you know what I mean? And I'm working on that myself. I don't have the answers, but when I'm feeling insecure, when I'm feeling nervous, when I'm feeling, and as Karen said, those things are coming from the outside world. I question, you know, I look at those feelings and not try to say, who am I an imposter for or to, if that makes sense. So I think just summation, like I'm really trying to challenge language that has deep roots in a culture that chooses to make us feel othered. And so how do we not even engage in that language? How do we create new language? Part of this is about creating a new language that's inclusive, that's equitable, that's holistic, if that makes sense. So that's where I am in this.
Absolutely.
Folks, it feels like we have taken another step on the path to accountability to Afro-Latinx communities, which begins with us, begins with doing our own healing work, raising these conversations, opening up these conversations wherever there is an opportunity to do so, naming things. There are some beautiful pearls that came out of today, naming these things, taking them out of the shadows, bringing them into the light, bringing our Black, Latin, beautiful selves into the light. I just want to thank you for bringing all of your heart and soul to this panel. You definitely did this incredibly complex subject justice in the little bit of time that we had. And you've helped us launch this conversation that I know will continue this. We're going to continue this conversation. And those of you in our colleagues in the audience, help us to keep that going. If you have ideas about where else, how else we can bring this conversation and continue it, get in touch with Erica. We welcome continuing this work. Erica, I leave it to you for the closing word.
Thank you to everyone for being here today. We really want to hear from you. We have a survey that we would love for you to fill out. We will be raffling off books. Happy Social Work Month in advance to all my social workers here. We have to celebrate ourselves, honor ourselves, and just continue to do this really, really incredible work. We all have a purpose, and coming together today was an incredible purpose that I didn't even realize was mine till seeing this space fill up with all these beautiful people. So thank you so much. We hope to see you at more upcoming events. We will continue to do this work, stay connected, and just be love. Thank you.